In the dazzling world of luxury cars, appearances often dictate the level of service a customer receives. One seemingly ordinary day, an unassuming woman walked into an elite car dealership, her presence barely acknowledged by the impeccably dressed sales staff. Dressed casually in a hoodie and a cap, she was given no more than a fleeting glance before being dismissed as just another window shopper. What the saleswoman at the dealership didn't realize, however, was that this particular customer was none other than Sandra Bullock, an award-winning actress and an influential figure in the entertainment industry. And her assumptions were about to cost her dearly. An unwelcome guest. The sunlight reflected off the showroom's pristine glass panels as Sandra stepped inside. Her posture was relaxed, her movements slow and measured as she walked past the lineup of sleek, high-end vehicles. The scent of polished leather and freshly waxed exteriors filled the air, a clear testament to the exclusivity of the establishment. Despite her evident interest, Sandra went unnoticed. Employees clad in crisp designer suits flitted between their well-dressed clientele, offering tailored assistance to those they deemed worthy. She observed the interactions around her, watching as salespeople eagerly attended to men in tailored suits and women carrying luxury handbags. Still, she remained patient. Moving toward a striking convertible with pristine white leather seats, Sandra ran her fingers lightly over the smooth exterior. She admired the craftsmanship, the elegant curves, and the impeccable detailing. But as minutes passed without a single offer of assistance, she realized she would have to make the first move. Approaching the service desk, she waited for the saleswoman to acknowledge her. The woman, with a practiced smile, turned toward her, but with an unmistakable air of detachment. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone polite but distant. Sandra gestured toward the convertible. "I'm interested in this model. Is it available?" The saleswoman's lips curled slightly, though the smile never quite reached her eyes. "That's one of our premium models. It comes with an exclusive package." She paused deliberately before continuing. "Perhaps I can show you some more affordable options." Sandra met her gaze with quiet composure. "I'd like to know more about this one." The saleswoman hesitated, as if weighing whether it was worth her time to entertain this request. After a moment, she sighed and reluctantly conceded. "All right, but just so you know, this model is priced quite high." Sandra simply nodded. "That's fine." The conversation continued as the saleswoman rattled off details about the car's engine, interior, and customizations. However, her demeanor lacked the enthusiasm she had shown moments earlier to another customer, sharply dressed man, adorned with a luxury timepiece. "You seem to know a lot about cars," the saleswoman remarked, barely concealing her surprise. Sandra offered a small shrug. "I like to make informed purchases." But the saleswoman's skepticism lingered. "We usually reserve test drives for serious buyers," she added, her tone carrying an edge of doubt. Sandra raised an eyebrow. "And I don't seem serious?" The saleswoman faltered slightly, but quickly composed herself. "That's not what I meant. It's just that this model is in high demand, and we have to be selective." Sandra studied her for a moment before offering a knowing smile. "I understand." With that, she turned away, her hands slipping into the pockets of her hoodie. The saleswoman, relieved to be rid of her, redirected her attention to another customer she deemed more deserving of her time. What she didn't know, however, was that Sandra Bullock had no intention of leaving just yet. And what would happen next would turn the entire dealership upside down. A familiar face changes everything. Just as Sandra was about to step away, the automatic doors of the dealership slid open once again. A new presence entered the showroom, one that carried an unspoken authority. Dressed in a sleek black leather jacket and dark sunglasses, the man strode in with an effortless confidence. His tousled hair caught the light, and his calm yet purposeful movements commanded immediate attention. The atmosphere in the dealership shifted almost instantly. The saleswoman, who had just dismissed Sandra, glanced toward the entrance, ready to greet another high-profile customer. However, when the man stopped in the middle of the showroom, his gaze sweeping the floor before landing on Sandra, her smile faltered. Then, in a smooth, easy tone, he spoke. "Hope I didn't keep you waiting too long, Bullock." The words echoed across the showroom, and in that moment, the saleswoman's heart plummeted. Bullock. The realization struck like a bolt of lightning. Her breath hitched as she pieced it together. The casually dressed woman she had just snubbed wasn't just any customer. She was Sandra Bullock, one of the most recognizable and respected actresses in Hollywood. A murmur rippled through the dealership as other employees and customers turned their heads, catching on to the significance of what had just happened. Eyes widened. Glances were exchanged. Some even reached for their phones, discreetly snapping pictures or recording the unexpected turn of events. Meanwhile, Sandra remained composed, her expression unreadable as she watched the saleswoman's face drain of color. Keanu Reeves, oblivious to the tension, approached her with a grin. "Good to see you. Did you pick out your car?" Sandra smirked slightly, but before she could answer, the saleswoman let out a nervous, shaky breath and stepped forward. Her entire demeanor had transformed. "Mr. Reeves, what an honor to have you here," she stammered, her voice suddenly brimming with enthusiasm. Keanu frowned slightly, sensing the shift in the air but not yet understanding the full context. He looked between Sandra and the saleswoman before turning back to his friend. "What's up? Why does everyone look like they just saw a ghost?" Sandra didn't reply immediately. Instead, she tilted her head slightly. Her gaze locked onto the saleswoman, who was now visibly sweating. "I think someone just realized they made the biggest mistake of their career," she said coolly. Keanu's eyebrows shot up. He finally took a good look at the woman standing before them, her forced smile, her anxious posture, the way her eyes darted between Sandra and the other onlookers. "You refuse to serve Sandra?" he asked, his tone sharper now. The saleswoman's mouth opened, then closed again. She fumbled for words. Two didn't realize who she was. Sandra let out a dry chuckle. "Ah, so now I have the right profile to be helped, huh?" The woman flinched, but there was no escaping the weight of her own actions. Everyone in the room had seen it. The difference in treatment was undeniable. Keanu shook his head, disappointment evident on his face. "This still happens? Unbelievable." The saleswoman swallowed hard, desperately trying to salvage the situation. "Miss Bullock, please, I didn't mean—" Sandra raised a hand, silencing her. Then, with an almost amused expression, she asked, "So, can I take the test drive now?" The woman hesitated, her voice barely above a whisper. "Of course, we can arrange that immediately." Sandra arched an eyebrow. "Now I can?" The saleswoman nodded frantically. "Yes, absolutely." But Sandra simply smiled, shaking her head. "No, thank you. I think I'd rather buy from someone who respects me before knowing my name." The final blow landed. The saleswoman's face crumpled with sheer horror as the reality of her mistake fully sank in. Keanu chuckled under his breath and clapped Sandra on the back. "Shall we? Let's go," Sandra said casually, turning on her heel. As they walked toward the exit, Sandra glanced over her shoulder one last time at the now devastated saleswoman. "Oh, and thanks for the suggestion about the more affordable dealership," she added with a sharp smile. "But I think I'll just buy straight from the manufacturer instead." The automatic doors slid open, and with that, Sandra Bullock and Keanu Reeves walked out, leaving behind a stunned, silent dealership where one saleswoman had just learned the hardest lesson of her career. The fallout begins. The air inside the dealership remained heavy long after Sandra and Keanu walked out. Conversations had hushed, replaced by exchanged glances and whispered murmurs. Employees stood awkwardly in place, pretending to focus on their work while secretly processing the spectacle they had just witnessed. But the person who felt it the most, the one who felt the weight of the entire disaster pressing down on her chest, was the saleswoman. She remained frozen in place, her breathing shallow, her mind racing. Her mistake had played out in front of dozens of customers and employees, and now she was left to face the consequences. Then, the sharp voice of the dealership's manager cut through the silence. "My office, now." The saleswoman's stomach twisted into knots. Without a word, she turned and followed him, her heels clicking against the pristine floor as she made her way toward the back of the showroom. Inside the manager's office, the air was thick with tension. The door slammed shut behind her, and as she turned, she was met with his furious glare. "Do you have any idea how badly you just screwed up?" he demanded. The saleswoman swallowed hard, her throat dry. The manager didn't wait for an answer. Instead, he grabbed his tablet and turned it toward her. The screen was already filled with headlines and social media posts. Sandra Bullock, humiliated at luxury dealership. Keanu Reeves, exposes discriminatory treatment in car showroom. Saleswoman denies Hollywood star. A test drive gets what she deserves. Each headline felt like a dagger to the chest. But it wasn't just the media. Social media had exploded. The video of the incident, captured by multiple customers, was spreading like wildfire. The comment sections were ruthless. People were calling for boycotts, flooding the dealership's online pages with negative reviews, dragging their reputation through the mud. The manager tossed the tablet onto his desk. "The whole internet is roasting us," he seethed. "We just lost two of the most influential customers we could have had because you decided to judge someone by their clothes." The saleswoman opened her mouth to defend herself, but nothing came out. The manager sighed, rubbing his temples. "I should fire you right now." The word sent a jolt of fear through her, but before she could break down, he continued. "But," he exhaled sharply, "maybe there's still a chance to fix this." The saleswoman blinked in surprise. "I want you to do something," the manager said firmly. "You are going to find a way to apologize genuinely to Sandra Bullock." The saleswoman felt her heart hammer in her chest. "And if I do?" The manager leaned back, arms crossed. "Then maybe I'll consider not firing you." A heavy silence followed. Then, with a shaky breath, the saleswoman nodded. "I understand." "Good," the manager snapped. "Now get out of my office." As she left, her mind raced with one troubling question. How was she supposed to apologize to Sandra Bullock? A second chance or a last one? It took her 3 days to find a way to reach Sandra. 3 days of stress, sleepless nights, and uncertainty. Finally, through a mutual connection in the industry, she was able to arrange a meeting. The location? A quiet cafe in the city neutral ground. She arrived early, nerves twisting in her gut as she waited. Then, exactly noon, the cafe door swung open and Sandra Bullock walked in. She was dressed just as casually as before: jeans, a simple top, sunglasses perched on her head. Yet, despite her effortless appearance, she carried herself with undeniable grace and presence. The saleswoman immediately stood up. Sandra took a slow glance at her, before sitting down across from her, arms resting lightly on the table. Her expression was unreadable. The saleswoman swallowed, her palms sweaty. Then, finally, she forced herself to speak. I just wanted to apologize." Sandra tilted her head slightly but didn't say a word. The saleswoman took a deep breath. "I know I was arrogant, judgmental, completely unfair, and I have no excuse for it." Sandra remained silent, her gaze piercing. "All I can say is, I messed up. Badly." Sandra finally leaned forward, lacing her fingers together. "You want me to accept your apology?" The saleswoman nodded. "Not for my job. I know that's already lost. I just want you to know that I genuinely regret what I did." There was a long pause. Then, to the saleswoman's surprise, Sandra gave a small smile. "You know," she said, "I've dealt with a lot of people like you." The saleswoman lowered her head, ashamed. "But," Sandra continued, "not many have the courage to admit when they're wrong." The saleswoman looked up, surprised. Sandra picked up her coffee, took a slow sip, then placed the cup back down. "So you're sorry? That's great. But the real question is, what are you going to do with that?" The saleswoman frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" Sandra smirked. "Being sorry is easy. Changing is hard." The words struck deep. The saleswoman remained silent, truly thinking about them. Then, after a moment, she exhaled and nodded. I'm going to prove that I've learned." Sandra studied her for a second, then nodded in return. "Good." The saleswoman blinked. "So, does that mean you accept my apology?" Sandra stood up, picking up her coffee cup. As she turned to leave, she glanced over her shoulder and winked. "Good luck with that." And just like that, she walked out, leaving the saleswoman sitting there, staring after her, wondering if she'd truly been forgiven, or if she'd just been given a challenge. A lesson that sticks. A week had passed since the disastrous incident at the dealership. In that short time, the company had taken a severe hit. Online reviews had plummeted. Social media was still buzzing with discussions about what had happened. Some loyal customers reconsidered whether they wanted to buy from a dealership with a reputation for discrimination. And the saleswoman? She was still employed, but barely. The manager had given her an ultimatum. Prove that you've changed, or you're out. No second chances. She had one shot to show that she had truly learned her lesson. And that shot was about to come. The real test. It was another ordinary day at the dealership when a new customer walked in. The saleswoman, standing near the service desk, noticed him immediately. He wasn't dressed in a fancy suit. No designer watch, no luxury accessories. Instead, he wore a simple button-up shirt, a pair of worn jeans, and sneakers that had seen better days. A month ago, she might have dismissed him. might have assumed he wasn't serious about buying. But now, she saw the situation differently. As he walked past the showroom floor, his eyes scanned the car lot with the aimless curiosity of a window shopper, but with the focused interest of someone who knew exactly what he wanted. That was all the confirmation she needed. She approached him with a warm, professional smile. "Hi there, welcome. Can I help you find something specific today?" The man looked at her, a bit surprised almost, as if he expected to be ignored. "Actually, yeah," he said. "I've had my eye on the new convertible. I read about its performance online and wanted to check it out in person." The saleswoman nodded. "Great choice. It's an incredible model. Would you like me to walk you through the features?" The man's eyes lit up slightly, pleased by the attention. "That would be awesome." As she guided him toward the vehicle, she answered every question he had, not just the basic details, but the in-depth specs. She took her time explaining customization options, financing plans, and even offered a test drive without hesitation. And when the man hesitated, mentioning that he wasn't sure if he wanted to buy today, she didn't brush him off. She didn't push him aside for a better customer. Instead, she smiled and said, "No rush. Buying a car is a big decision. If you want, I can send you more details via email so you have time to think it over." The man looked at her for a long moment before finally grinning. "You know," he said, "I went to another dealership last week, and they barely even looked at me." The saleswoman felt a pang of shame at how easily that could have been her just a week ago. "Well," she said with an easy smile, "every customer deserves respect, no exceptions." The man nodded, clearly appreciative. And just like that, she passed the real test. A final message. Later that night, after her shift ended, the saleswoman checked her phone. A notification popped up. A new online review had been posted about the dealership. She clicked on it, curious. The username? Sandra Bullock. Her breath caught as she read the comment. "Sometimes the best lessons come from the worst mistakes. I hope they stick." The saleswoman stared at the words for a long moment. She had no idea if Sandra truly forgave her. But one thing was certain. She had been given a second chance. And this time, she wasn't going to waste it. The unexpected invitation. Days turned into weeks, and the viral buzz surrounding Sandra Bullock's experience at the dealership finally began to die down. The saleswoman, now hyper-aware of her actions, remained dedicated to proving she had truly changed. She treated every customer with the same level of respect, regardless of their appearance. She made sure no one ever felt dismissed the way Sandra had. But even as the dealership moved forward, she couldn't shake the feeling that she still had unfinished business. Then, one evening, as she was closing up for the night, an email notification popped up on her phone. Subject: "A chance to prove it." She frowned and opened the message. "You say you've changed. I believe in second chances, but words are easy, actions are harder. How about you put your new mindset to the test? I have a business associate looking for a car. If you really learned your lesson, you'll treat him the same way you'd treat me or Keanu Reeves. If you're up for it, you'll know him when you see him. Sandra B." Her heart pounded. Sandra was giving her an opportunity, a challenge, even. But who was this mysterious associate? And when would he show up? The next morning, she arrived at work more focused than ever. Every customer that walked through the doors, she wondered, "Is this the one Sandra sent?" Hours passed, and then, just after lunch, a man stepped inside. He didn't look like a celebrity. He didn't look rich. In fact, he looked downright ordinary gray slacks, an old polo shirt, scuffed shoes. He carried himself casually, his eyes moving over the showroom with mild curiosity. The saleswoman took a deep breath and approached him with a smile. "Good afternoon. Welcome in. Can I help you find something?" The man glanced at her, his expression unreadable. "Just looking." "No problem," she said, keeping her tone warm and professional. "Let me know if anything catches your eye." She didn't pressure him. She didn't make assumptions. She simply let him take his time. After a few minutes, he walked up to a sleek black luxury sedan and ran his hand lightly over the hood. "This one looks nice," he mused. "It's one of our best models," she responded. "Would you like to sit inside? Feel the interior?" The man raised an eyebrow, as if slightly surprised by her offer. "Yeah, sure." She opened the door for him, guiding him through the premium features. He asked a few technical questions, and she answered them all with the same enthusiasm she would have given any high-profile client. Then, after a moment of hesitation, he asked, "Think I could take it for a test drive?" A test drive, the very thing she had once denied Sandra Bullock. But now, there wasn't a shred of hesitation. Of course. Let me grab the keys. The man watched her closely, as if analyzing every move. She wasn't sure why, but something about his demeanor felt intentional. As she walked back with the keys, her manager shot her a curious glance. New customer? She nodded. I think so. Good work, he murmured, impressed. The test drive went smoothly. She made sure the man had all the information he needed, and when he returned, he seemed pleased. Thanks for your time, he said as he handed the keys back. You've been really helpful. The saleswoman smiled. Of course. No rush on deciding if you need anything else. Feel free to reach out. The man studied her for a long moment. Then, very deliberately, he reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and tapped something on the screen. A second later, her phone vibrated with an email notification. She glanced down. It was from Sandra Bullock. Subject: You passed. Her head snapped up in shock. The man gave her a knowing smirk. She wanted to see if you'd really changed, he said. I'd say you did. And with that, he turned and walked out, leaving her standing there stunned. A new beginning. The saleswoman stood frozen, staring at the email on her phone. You passed. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened the message. You treated him exactly how you should treat every customer, with respect, patience, and honesty. That's all I wanted to see. I won't tell you who he is. You'll figure it out soon enough. But let's just say, you might have just helped someone very important. Consider this your clean slate. Do something good with it. Sandra B. A strange mix of relief and disbelief washed over her. She had spent weeks trying to prove she had learned from her mistake. But deep down, she never truly believed Sandra would give her the chance to redeem herself. And now, she had. But who was the man? The question lingered in her mind all day. Every time she glanced toward the door, half expecting him to return, her curiosity burned stronger. Then, just before closing time, her manager approached her. You've been doing good work lately, he said, his tone unreadable. Thank you, she replied cautiously. You know that man you helped earlier? He continued, crossing his arms. She nodded. Yeah. Why? The manager let out a low chuckle. Turns out he's not just some random guy. He's a major investor in the automotive industry. Owns shares in several luxury car manufacturers. Her breath hitched. Wait. What? Her manager smirked. Oh yeah. Word got around about how you treated him. Let's just say some very influential people are pleased with what they heard. The saleswoman's heart pounded. So, what does that mean? It means, the manager said, placing a firm hand on her shoulder, that you just made the best career move of your life. Her mind reeled. The very thing that had almost cost her everything, the way she had judged people by appearances, was now the reason she was being recognized. She had been given a second chance, and this time she had earned it. The final lesson. That night, as she walked to her car, she felt lighter than she had in weeks. Her phone buzzed again, another message from Sandra. One last thing. Remember, redemption isn't about fixing the past, it's about building the future. Keep going. She smiled to herself. This wasn't just about proving something to Sandra. This was about proving something to herself. And for the first time in a long while, she knew she had.